Chairman.
The Honourable Amy Adams.
At the risk of being not nearly as fluent as Calvin Davis, e te tia mana tēnā koe. Huri nō e te whareparamata ni ngā mihi ka te mema katoa tēnei te wiki o te reo Māori. Okay, look, it's my great pleasure to take a call in estimates debate on the justice sector, votes, courts and justice, of which of course are my responsibility, and on behalf of my fellow ministers and vote Attorney General, vote police, vote corrections and vote parliamentary council. Mr Chairman, in this year's budget of course we saw an investment of more than $880 million in the justice sector, a significant investment by any calculation, and in my own area of courts and justice we saw an investment of more than $208 million, which I'm certainly very proud of. And as part of that, I want to particularly commend the significant investment into access to justice, which is an issue that I think New Zealand does have a valid and right interest in, and we have seen the increase in the civil legal aid thresholds. We've seen a full commitment to funding for criminal and civil legal aid. We have seen increases to the Public Defence Service. We've seen a guarantee of continuity of funding for the community law centres. Mr Speaker, $96 million supporting access to justice is, as I say, is certainly a sizeable commitment. In her opening contribution, the chair of the Justice Electoral Committee, who does a fantastic job, Jackie Dean, the member for Waitaki, made reference to the fact that I have put at the heart of my time in the role of the Minister of Justice, in particular the victims of family and sexual violence, but actually more broadly how our system protects and promotes the interests of the vulnerable and the victims in our society. And that work has really been the focus over the year in discussion and will be the focus going forward. Ms Dean talked about our National Home Safety Service, which we've put out the first year's stats on today, and like Ms Dean, I have been simply amazed at the very significant differences we've seen in the safety of these predominantly women, but not only, and their children. And I think actually it's more important than that. It actually represents a fundamental shift in thinking in the way the system responds to family violence, which is saying it's no longer the done thing to say, get out, get yourself a protection order, get yourself off to a shelter. Actually, it's not the job of the victim to have to disrupt their lives, separate from their children, remove themselves from all of their supports, their jobs, the kids' schools and the like. Actually, it's a system's job to better deal with the perpetrator. So this is about recognising we want the victims to be able to stay in their homes, their kids to stay in their schools, in their communities, keep them safe, and let us deal with the perpetrator, because the only way we address this behaviour is stopping the perpetrators offending. Now, I know that sounds like a trite statement, but actually it is a significant shift and an important one. Mr Chairman, it is of course just one of the changes we've made over the past year in this area as we work on the more substantial reform that Ms Dean referenced through our ministerial work group program. We've also seen a significant shift in information sharing, whether it's between the criminal and family jurisdictions of the court. We've seen a far better family violence summary information pack put in front of judges when they're making bail decisions, so that we know that judges have the full information about the criminal and family violence history of the offenders when they're making those critical bail decisions. And through the good work of Minister Collins and police, we've seen the new police disclosure scheme, which has enabled people to go to the police and seek information on a partner or prospective partner to ensure that they can keep themselves safe. And just this week in Christchurch, we've started a pilot that I have incredibly high hopes for, the Integrated Safety Response Pilot, which is building on not only the work that's been done in New Zealand through systems like FIVIRES and multi-agency response, but also taking the best of the learnings from the UK through their merit programs, ensuring that we have all of the agencies from whanaora to SIFs to social housing to police, obviously, to counselling services and NGOs, coming up with a plan, doing a risk assessment, wrapping an intensive case management process around high-risk victims, and importantly, following up. We've been very good at doing triage, not so good at following up. And Mr Speaker, there will of course be more to come. We've seen the appointment of New Zealand's first ever Chief Victims Advisor in Dr Kim McGregor. And I can tell this House that Dr McGregor is doing a wonderful job already and has already given me several very good pieces of advice and information, helping me to ensure that the voice of the victim is right at the heart of our policy making. And Mr Speaker, I did want to particularly mention the $16.2 million extra funding we've put into restorative justice in this budget. Can I just tell this House that since 2014, the referrals to restorative justice have tripled? And actually, that's not just a sort of a nice, warm, cuddly thing to do. We know that for people who go through restorative justice, we see 26% fewer offences committed and a 15% lower offending rate, Mr Chair. So that is a real difference, and it's part of the reason, Mr Chair, why the crime rate has dropped 16% since 2011. 16% since 2011, confirmed by the latest crime stats that have come out, and that's something that we should be very, very proud of. Not to say the job is done, any crime is too much, but we're seeing a steady pattern of reduction in offending, the exception being family violence, and that is why, frankly, as a country, we have to do more about that. I want to just mention briefly to the commitment to the budget also around the $16 million mark for setting up the new approved agency under the Harmful Digital Communications Act. This is something, again, that I'm extremely proud of. We're being looked at. In fact, I've been asked by Justice and Police Ministers from across Australian jurisdictions to do a presentation to them on our law and how it's working, because it is something that they see as a very successful way of tackling this insidious new form of harassment and cyberbullying that we see. I was delighted to announce the appointment of NetSafe to the role, and I have no doubt that they will be a hugely successful partner for us in that space. Can I just very quickly, in the remainder of my contribution, talk about our court system? Our court system, I think, doesn't get the credit that it deserves. 277,000 cases a year go through our courts and tribunals, and that, frankly, is just the tip of the iceberg. And even though we are dealing with some very complex cases, some very difficult proceedings, we've seen a 43% reduction in the number of the ages of High Court civil appeal cases, a 35% reduction in the age of Māori land court cases, and a 20% reduction in the age of district court criminal jury trials. Now, this is important. Actually, we want justice to be timely. No one wants to be in the system longer than they need to. And again, we've got more that we want to do, but certainly making some very good progress. I want to just touch on three specific projects that I'm very proud of. The first is the commitment that I've made and the funding we've secured in the budget to restore the Dunedin courthouse. I have to say to this House that when I went to Dunedin and saw the court, it was immediately apparent to me that this was a building that we simply had to ensure was restored to its full glory, was properly strengthened, and more importantly could return to being the court. It's not a cheap project, I can assure this House, but we have fully funded it in this budget, and we're looking forward to that work getting underway. Similarly, in Jackie Dean's own electorate of Waitaki, we have managed to negotiate with Jackie Dean's assistants I would say saving of the Oamaru District Court. Again, a fantastic Victorian-style building in that white stone that Oamaru is famous for. Again, we had to vacate after the earthquakes, and there was a real risk, I think, of court services certainly being lost from that building and potentially even from Oamaru. With the good work of my predecessor, Chester Borrows, and the work that's been done since, we've negotiated an agreement with the council whereby they will take on ownership of the building, do the restoration, and we can lease back to use those court services, which I think has been a win-win for the community and for courts. Finally, the Christchurch Justice and Emergency Precinct, which really has been a flagship of the regeneration of the government in central Christchurch. It is looking fantastic, that the shape, the exterior is almost complete. It is a 42,000 square metre complex, $350 million project. And not only does it bring 9 different agencies together to work in a coordinated, sensible, integrated way where we reduce, the number of holding cells, we reduce the movement of prisoners, we make it easier for people to come in, better emergency management. But really critically, as a member involved in the Christchurch and Canterbury earthquake recovery, when that precinct is open in around June of next year, it's going to bring 2,000 people a day into the CBD of Christchurch. And if there's one thing you hear from the small businesses in Canterbury, it's that until you get those pump-priming major industries coming in that bring the people in, the little cafes don't start, and the little shoe shops close to my heart don't start, and all of those little things that give a city a buzz and the life. Now, The Christchurch Justice and Emergency Precinct is one part of that, but it is a very tangible signal to the people of Christchurch that actually the government is in town, we're coming back, the lawyers come back around us, the banks come back around them, and it will see in a very tangible way the redevelopment, the rejuvenation, the recovery of the city and the district that I love so much. Mr. Speaker, I can't wait to be there for the opening, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work in this space to promote the vulnerable, the victims in our society, and as I say, do whatever we can for family and sexual violence victims in New Zealand. Kia ora.
Oh, David Clendon.